Be chill, Cecil. Hey, this is Creating Marvels, and I'm your host, Cecil Disharoon. Let's talk stories. Specifically, let's get into the original Doctor Strange strips from 1963. That sounds like fun, right? Check it out. First, we start with creator Steve Ditko, who worked with Stan Lee on Spider Man and also created Doctor Strange. Here he is from Strange Tales 110. Now, 1963 was an exciting time for Marvel Comics. The X Men premiere, the Avengers are formed, and Doctor Strange appears in his first 5-page features over in Strange Tales. His first enemy is Nightmare, but its arch enemy is Baron Mordo, a fellow disciple of the Ancient One. Some say the first year or so of Doctor Strange stories could be placed in earlier continuity, and he's retroactively said to have been active before the Fantastic Four were created. Stephen Strange is allied with his mentor, the Ancient One, against foes such as the Master of the Realm of Dark Dreams, Nightmare, who we see evolving in his early appearances. Ditko populates this mystical world with bold strokes and bright colors, preferring his shadow's sinister quality to his villains. Along with some nebulous, far-out world building, also see Strange evoke mystic deities. Interestingly, early on he calls on the Dread Dormammu, and sure enough, the Dread Dormammu ends up becoming a major Doctor Strange foe. While the full 22-page monthly Spider-Man strip gave us an enduring population of supervillains, Doctor Strange strip presents a mysterious lead character, spoken of in whispers. Doctor Strange resolves cases that are very similar to the kind of material that the Strange Tales magazine had been producing now for years, only this is very high quality and had a consistent lead character. The best early stories usually involve Baron Mordo and their unique style of mystic combat, but I find this haunted house story interesting, most of all because one day it will be revisited, as drawn here by Sal Buscema, in Rom the Space Knight number 5. You can see the cool matchup of styles of storytelling between Buscema and Ditko, and both times the lead characters have a similar situation where they discover that the house that they have just entered is actually an extra-dimensional being. Like Doctor Strange, Rom is able to discern the nature of this being that he and his friends are facing, and his neutralizer seems to reveal a pretty cool flashback tying together this new character created by Marvel for a toy line back to the Silver Age where the Marvel Age began. And one day, Steve Ditko would become the artist for Rom the Space Knight for its last year and a half of publication. There are many contrasts you can draw between the two Ditko characters, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. When we first meet Peter Parker, he's just forming his moral code. Stephen Strange, on the other hand, has had years to consider his commitment and chooses to watch over all of mankind without expectation of reward or recognition. Peter Parker is considerably less sure of himself. Doctor Strange often seems very prepared and knowledgeably connected to the mystic world in which he moves, and despite their skepticism, even has a relationship with the police, some of whom respect and use his occult knowledge. The 5 and then 8-page increments were so popular, Doctor Strange soon had equal billing with co-star Human Torch. Each of them had a similar number of pages each month. And as you can see, Steve Ditko really found his groove with this. It's everything that I think that Steve does best in some ways. The fun explorations of consciousness, other realms, the macabre and the imaginative. While their insights may not be considered modern, the plots are unbridled and fantastic. Ditko's especially good at summoning minions. It's cool that Loki crosses over from Thor's book, but I guess Jack Kirby has spoiled me with his Loki. The battles take place in lonely, psychedelic, creepy conditions, and it's possible to note the contrast between the surreal settings in Strange Tales as opposed to those in Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man's busy guest starring with half the Marvel Universe. He's quickly becoming the flagship character of the line. Amazing Spider-Man also, despite its lonely protagonist, has a lot of supporting characters. Through them, a sense of depth is built. And the supporting characters even have a habit of getting right in the thick of the battles with the colorful enemies of his rogues gallery. Doctor Strange has enigmatic faceless enemies, while Peter Parker has a high school bully, Flash Thompson, who's also his biggest fan and even impersonates Spidey twice. Spider-Man's life and his problems are almost always set in New York City. It's a hallmark of the strip that Spidey deals with the mundane practically all the time. And while it's silly and satirical, it's also the closest to being grounded in the world we know. Doctor Strange, on the other hand, fends for our very sanity. He watches over the world, if not eventually the universe. He comes up with strategies to deal with the inconceivable, and right from the start helps even those who may have strayed from the path of good. Like Peter Parker, he's a student, only Pete's a novice scientist, whereas this is an experienced surgeon who's also taken on occult learning from the East. Though one common bond between these Ditko characters is their love for an elderly mentor, domestic and fragile Aunt May of those times, and of course the drastically different ancient one. So there's lots of contrast between this young scientist who has a mysterious sixth sense and this sorcerer who has a phone that acts up sometimes. Doc's arrival was timely too, because the expansion of consciousness and exploration of different states of awareness was just starting to become a huge part of the youth counterculture, though Steve Ditko himself was certainly no hippie. While the Torch's stories were used to expand and connect with characters from the other titles, the 11-page flights of fancy that were Doctor Strange's stories mostly occurred across an expansive, imaginative world created by Ditko's pencil. After 2 solo stories, the Good Doctor's origin and his original connection with Ancient One and Baron Mordo were told in Strange Tales 115. About 2 months later, after a year of those stories, he finally had a worthy arch-foe in Dormammu, a real heavy. Soon, Ditko and Lee would use Dormammu as the centerpiece of a 15-page continued story, the first of its kind at Marvel. Doctor Strange was a legend in the making. Thank you, my friends, for joining in for a few imaginative moments of history with me. And I'm Cecil Disharoon. We'll see you next time on Creating Marvels.